5 books and counting. The Tales from the Omni Vault continues to expand as a universe. Go ahead and check the links down in the description to get your copies today. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and welcome to One Monstrous Moment Year of the Dragon Edition. Once again, kaiju fans from all over the internet are coming together to select favorite scenes from the kaiju genre, regardless of medium, and talk about why they work so well and, by extension, why we love the genre so much. I must admit that, at first, I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do for this particular round, but after watching Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster again, inspiration struck. So let us begin. I haven't spoken that much about Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster in the past, which I must apologize for because it's really good. Sure, it was a departure from the sci-fi elements of the previous 2 films, largely because it was originally meant to feature King Kong, but the result is a fun island adventure that adds variety to the Showa timeline. There's plenty of intrigue in the human plot as we watch a group of shipwrecked strangers struggling against both the elements and a well-organized group of supervillains. The music is a memorable fusion of traditional symphony and surfer rock that really gets stuck in the brain. Plus we have a cute island babe, which automatically makes any movie better. It's true, the lack of an island babe is the one thing that keeps Citizen Kane from attaining true perfection. As for the monsters side, we get the first underwater fight in the whole series, and some intriguing development for Godzilla, but I'll be elaborating on that in a moment. First, though, let's make sure everyone's up to speed on the plot before we get to my chosen scene.
The scene is at the end, though, so that means summarizing the whole movie.
That's true, Snazzy, but we must do what we must do. Would you care to do the honors this time?
Sure, why not?
Ryota's brother Yada has been lost at sea and feared dead. Convinced that he's still alive, Ryota steals a yacht. Along for the ride are Ichino and Nita, 2 guys he just met while hitching a ride, and Yoshimura, who's clearly a bank robber despite his evasiveness when asked. The quartet end up shipwrecked on Devil's Island, base of operations for the villainous forces of the Red Bamboo and home to the sea monster ebirah. The castaways are joined by Dio, a native of Infant Island who escaped enslavement from the Red Bamboo. While running, our heroes discover that Godzilla is sleeping in a cave on the island and eventually decide to wake him up. They figure that as long as they stay out of his way, Godzilla will keep the villains occupied and might even dispose of them on his own. That will at least buy them some time until Mothra finally wakes up to bring them to safety.
How was that?
Not bad, I think that covers the basics. Like I said, Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster is a fun entry in the series, but what if I told you that it's also a vital step in Godzilla's journey from villain to hero? To understand why, we must zero in on the finale, which brings us to the scene in question. So it goes like this. We are finally at the end of the film. The Red Bamboo have been defeated, ebirah has been disarmed, and the enslaved infant islanders have been freed, but our heroes can't just rest on their laurels. As a final move to cover their tracks, the Red Bamboo activated a nuclear bomb that will destroy the whole island, and the switch to stop the countdown is inaccessible. Mothra has shown up to carry everyone to safety, and despite a brief disagreement with Godzilla, she succeeds. Yet as the humans depart, they see Godzilla watching them go and suddenly feel bad for leaving him behind to either die or be wounded in the blast. They call out to him that he must leave before the island explodes, and to their collective relief, he manages to escape in time. The intention is to depict Godzilla in a sympathetic light, and a lot of how that is achieved comes down to the cinematography. This shot in particular really drives that point home. Take it in for a moment. Look at how small Godzilla looks here. Note how the camera is pulling away from him, which means he gets gradually smaller as we look on. After so many shots in the film that emphasize how huge and powerful Godzilla is, he suddenly looks tiny and, more importantly, vulnerable. In fact, this is the first time we've ever seen him in such a way.
Is it, though? What about Monster Zero?
Oh, you're referring to the departure from Planet X. Yes, we do get a similar shot of Godzilla and Rodan slowly shrinking into the distance as the astronauts leave them behind, and the audience is meant to feel a bit of sympathy for them here, but the context is slightly different. Like I said, we in the audience might feel bad for the monsters, but the astronauts sure don't. Fuji briefly expresses guilt about leaving them behind, but Glenn shuts it down quickly. Godzilla and Rodan have caused more problems than they've solved, so who cares if they're left stranded on another planet? Admittedly, that mindset is understandable, given how, by that point, those two had only really been good guys for the final minutes of one movie. In Sea Monster, on the other hand, the humans feel sympathy for Godzilla as they depart, and it isn't dismissed. After all, Godzilla wound up being quite helpful to them throughout the film. He was more than just a distraction, he was a proper ally. Now, some might argue that Godzilla is merely a coincidental ally whose actions just so happen to benefit the good guys without intending to be beneficial. That might be the case, but there is one scene earlier in the film that suggests otherwise. After Godzilla wakes up, the castaways get separated while fleeing the red bamboo, and Dio winds up alone in a rocky outcropping where the soldiers corner her. Godzilla shows up, and his mere presence sends the soldiers running scared. But Dio finds herself stuck when Godzilla takes notice of her. She's not sure if he'll let her leave his sight, and the others, when they arrive, fear provoking him if they get too close. Godzilla, apparently sensing that Dio won't be a problem, relaxes and falls asleep. The island girl tries to escape, only to have Okandaru swoop in looking for an easy meal. Dio screams, alerting Godzilla to an intruder, and one clash later, the goose is cooked. After this, Dio smiles as Godzilla tries to resume his nap. It sure seems to me like Godzilla is intentionally protecting Dio from harm. He doesn't wake up when Okandaru first appears, he only intervenes in response to Dio's call for help. This means it's the first time in the whole series where Godzilla deliberately saves a human being.
And you're sure it's not just a coincidence?
Well, think of it this way. This scene is obviously a holdover from when the script originally featured King Kong. Had it stayed that way and featured Kong in this role instead of Godzilla, would there be any question that it was deliberate?
No, I guess not.
And once you realize that, you must also reevaluate everything else. Godzilla spends the whole film attacking the villains and leaving the heroes alone, even when he has them in his sights. The only time he tussles with one of the good guys is his brief scuffle with Mothra, though to be fair, they have a history. When the humans declare that Godzilla is worth saving because he was friendly, they're clearly right. As such, this proves to be the pivotal point in the Showa timeline, the exact moment where Godzilla is recognized as a hero. And he's not alone. Now yes, Godzilla's journey towards heroism technically began in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster and continued in Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, but neither of those movies actually solidified the change. In Ghidorah, he takes a long time to be convinced into helping Mothra, and I already spoke of how quickly sympathy for him is dismissed in the sequel. He also spends most of both films retaining his status as the Destroyer, which precludes him from even being an anti-hero. The tides are clearly turning, but Godzilla is still far from a good guy. Here, though, Godzilla's presence is entirely beneficial to the castaways and detrimental to the red bamboo. Thus, the sympathy felt for him at the end is genuine. In fact, Godzilla's arc here is beautifully mirrored by one of the human characters, the man known as Yoshimura. Despite his evasiveness throughout the film, it's no secret that Yoshimura is a career criminal on the run after having just robbed a bank. As a crook, his primary interest is for himself, and knowledge of what he is makes Ryota, Nita, and Ichino uneasy. After all, this is a dangerous man. Who knows what he might do to them if they get on his bad side? Yet once everyone is on the island, Yoshimura's sharp mind and criminal skills provide them with a strong advantage over the red bamboo. Gradually, he slips into a more heroic role, taking point on espionage and using his unscrupulous talents to fight an evil that threatens the whole world. By the end, he declares that he'll turn over a new leaf and put thievery behind him. Apparently, he likes being a good guy. This announcement, interestingly enough, comes after everyone rejoices that Godzilla escaped the island before it blew up. Actually, it's also worth noting that Yoshimura initially objects to waking Godzilla up because he's a destructive force. He even says that Godzilla will destroy the world if he's unleashed again.
The obvious counter-argument there is that the red bamboo would also do that, so Godzilla could be the lesser of two evils.
Indeed, but then they actually go through with it. Once Godzilla is awake, he does nothing antagonistic to anyone except the obvious villains. Yoshimura sees with his own eyes that Godzilla, the creature that has menaced Japan for over a decade, has used his destructive abilities for good.
At the end, the sympathy everyone feels for Godzilla as he's left behind makes it all click for Yoshimura.
He too used his destructive abilities for good on the island. Both the robber and the monster began as villains, but they became heroes. If Godzilla can be good, so can Yoshimura.
We might even be able to see a hint of a religious theme applied to this film.
The island went unnamed in the English dub for years, but the original Japanese refers to it as Devil's Island, and indeed it is shown to be a place of evil. Here the innocents are enslaved, cruel despots make the worst weapons known to man, and the only way to safety is guarded by a monster.
It may not be as bad as the island from Matango, but it's certainly hellish in its own ways. Actually, maybe comparing it to hell isn't accurate. Perhaps it's more akin to purgatory.
After all, we see people who are both good and evil here, neither of whom have faced their ultimate fate just yet. Those who are good long for paradise, while those who are evil think only of the power they can attain in the world. By the end, Mothra, the embodiment of purity, brings both the good and the redeemed to their reward, while Ebirah, the blood-red guardian at the gate, has dragged the wicked into the abyss before being banished there himself. As for Godzilla and Yoshimura, they're granted a second chance and given the freedom to make the most of it.
We never see Yoshimura again, unfortunately, but we do see Godzilla again, and we know that he didn't squander his redemption. You can say that again.
As the series continues from here, he's put in charge of a new generation, then he becomes a teacher to the human race, and eventually graduates to a proper guardian.
And to think that might not have panned out the way it did if this had stayed a King Kong movie. In short, we have impressive visuals, 2 completed character arcs in one, and a vital turning point for the whole series. If that doesn't make for one monstrous moment, then I don't know what does. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni viewer signing off. Then again, maybe I really don't know what makes for one monstrous moment, so don't just take my word for it. Check out the complete Year of the Dragon playlist and see what everyone else came up with.
Thank you all for watching. Now be sure to head down to the description to check us out on other platforms, as well as find links to the 5 current books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Again, thank you all, and we'll see you next time.